Ba 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 ba.
Good day and welcome. I'm Joey, and this is Orange 20. Today we're going to do our second episode on designing different types of adventures. If you want to see the episode on dungeon crawls, look here. We are going to be going over how to write a mystery in your tabletop role-playing game. We will start out with how to build one, and then ways you might want to change how you generally run things, and what to do to avoid frustration on the part of your players as they try to solve your mystery. Unlike the other types of adventures you will run, mysteries are almost always reactive. Someone has already done a thing, and your players need to figure out what or how or why they did the thing, and potentially stop them from doing it again, or to stop the consequences from spiraling out of control. When you play a mystery game or read a mystery book, watch a movie or TV show, you have a very different perspective than what you need to write one. As an audience, it seems that there were reveals and twists, and they were the most exciting part of that game. You will generally want this experience for your players, but I know personally I can't think, what would be a great twist, and find my way to get the game there. Instead, you need to start at the other end of the story. Don't think, how will I hook the player characters into my twisted mystery? Instead, start in their absence. Most mysteries revolve around someone wanting to keep something hidden, a secret, which I will call a crime for the sake of this episode. But it doesn't necessarily have to be. So, for my mystery, I want it to be that a doppelganger has infiltrated Duke Ashcroft's court. A few months ago, Dak traveled into Yanhold after being discovered and chased out of the village of Umark. Tired of barely scraping by under an assumed persona, Dak decides he wants to make a fortune with the next face he takes, so he can set himself up for months and years to come. Notice that this is the opposite of how you would normally view a mystery. If this were the parlor speech of a detective, it would be the very last thing you hear, or the final confession after the murderer is finally caught. When you're writing the mystery, it's actually the very first thing you know. So, after 2 or 3 days in town, Dak decides that of the wealthy in the town, Myra Jazin, Duke Ashcroft's treasurer, is an isolated woman who lives alone without a family in a secure manor on the edge of town. She would be his best target. Dak skulks his way inside, murders her, and takes her form. Now I have the first crime and the core of the mystery. But if you want to make a whole game out of it, you'll want a bigger mystery. You want multiple layers for the characters to peel back. So if I'm writing a mystery, I will generally decide to put in a minimum of 3 crimes. Myra begins to embezzle from the Duke. First, she starts to move gold coins out of the treasury, a few each night. She doesn't want to take too many because what she is doing is secret and she doesn't want to be noticed. She's starting with coins because she can spend them on her preparations. She sets up a bolt hole in a hunter's cottage outside of town, which is trapped and maybe guarded by a trained hound, and quietly sneaks her stolen bounty out there, transforming into Nabal, the old dwarven gardener who tends to Myra's yard. Dak is still a changeling, and just in case he's caught with a purse full of stolen gold, he'll frame the gardener and then resume his theft as Myra. As time goes by, and Myra keeps getting away with it, she steals bigger things from the treasury, including gems and jewelry that would be recognized. This is the second crime, the next layer. Nemeas is a traveling half-elven bard who has had a secret relationship with Myra for the past 5 years, and they enjoy each other's company every time he comes through town. He has been hired by Duke Ashcroft to play a celebratory feast when his son is returned from the goblins who kidnapped him in a mine. The bard is happy, especially when he gets to spend time with Myra. Dak doesn't know anything about this, so that night, when the party is over and Nemeas sneaks in through Myra's window to surprise her, Myra is very surprised and pushes him out. The bard dies from the fall. Dak scrambles outside and hastily hides the body. Nibble, the gardener, comes across Myra hiding the bard's body, and so the doppelganger is forced to kill him too. Nibble puts up a fight, and Dak is forced to chase him across town before killing him. and then throws the dwarf's body down the well. Worried that things may have gone too far, Dak considers that it might be time to skip town. Using the forms of Nibel, Nemeus, and Myra, the doppelganger starts to make his preparations. One of the things you may have noticed is that by using a doppelganger, I've got a series of suspects who are all actually victims. Bodies can be, and should be, found by the PCs. While your villain shouldn't be perfect at covering up their crimes, if they were absolutely terrible at diverting suspicion, you wouldn't have much of a mystery. This can take the form of false suspects like I've used, or a how could they have done it mystery. These are generally less interesting in a world where the answer can legitimately be magic. You can also be looking at why they would have done it. In this mystery, players know that someone took the money from the Duke's vault, so they know the why. When they find the bodies, they might not know why they were killed, but they will have to assume who is likely the thief who stole from the treasury. And they'll be right. You need to have a lot of information in place before you even look at how the player characters get involved, mostly because they react to the situation, so you need to know what the situation is. So if I'm running this venture, it takes place after the PCs rescue Duke Ashcroft's son from the goblins in the mine. He throws them a party, and then in the morning, he prepares to pay them. His treasurer is late for work, so he goes to the vault himself, and that's when he learns he's been robbed. To get paid, the players will need to find the thief. Once the players have their mystery, they'll start looking for clues. These can be physical clues or testimony from witnesses. You generally want to put in more clues than you think you would need. When the author of a mystery also controls the characters who are solving the mystery, they're going to A. Find the clues they need, B. Interpret them correctly, and C. Not wander too far down a false track. As the author of this mystery, if you put a clue down, you also are going to automatically interpret it correctly. You know how you think. However, other people won't think exactly like you, so you need to give them multiple options on how to find the correct answer. So, for the adventure above, the very first clue I give characters is that the treasurer hasn't shown up yet. Part of what's interesting about this particular mystery is the fact that the culprit is a doppelganger. So I want players to talk to Myra almost right away. If they go to her secluded home, she nearly bowls them over on the way out the door. She speaks quickly and wants to end the conversation with characters as fast as she can. Dak is concerned that the heroes could catch him, so if they give him any excuse to leave, such as mentioning the Duke was robbed, Myra will insist on going to the Duke's castle right away. If the players start to put too much heat or suspicion on Myra, then Dak will change forms into Nemeus as soon as he can. You'll want to give the players as many clues as you can. Tell them that there's dirt on Myra's sleeve. If they break into her house, there's a strange smell coming from the office. There's freshly dug dirt in her backyard. If they get stuck, Nabel's wife comes looking for him because he was supposed to pick up cheese on his way home and he's late. The neighbors are gossiping, waiting to see when Nemeus will come out of Myra's house, because she's always in the best mood when the bard comes through town, and it isn't quite as secret as the bard and Myra thought it was. One of the things I advise in a game like D&D is you want to make sure you're giving the clues. So, in the conversation with Myra, I may ask my players to make a perception check. I don't actually put a target number on it. Whoever gets the highest roll notices the dirt, and anybody who's relatively close, maybe within 2 or 3 of that roll, also gets that information. The reason I do this comes down to the design of Dungeons & Dragons. D&D assumes a certain type of action-based story. If you miss the sound of orcs sneaking up, then you're ambushed. If you fail to notice the trapped hallway, you lose a little bit of life. And if you don't realize the prisoner is lying about those holding him captive, you might be lured into an extra fight. Generally, it means that things get a little tougher, or you're down more resources as you go through the dungeon if you don't make these rolls, but it doesn't end the game. However, in a mystery, the question isn't, will the detective find the clues? It's, how do all the pieces fit together? So, if the point of the game session is a mystery, I don't let players miss clues. I might hide a really great smoking gun clue behind a very difficult skill roll. However, if players fail their perception check and insight check on Myra, and then fail their investigation check on her house, that's a pretty boring game when they don't have any idea who did it. The gumshoe system, which Trail of Cthulhu uses, has a really great mechanic. If a character is trained in a skill and they go to the location where the clue exists, they get it no matter what. They don't need to roll. I like the idea of adapting this to D&D. If you have perception trained, you notice the dirt on Myra's sleeve. If you have survival trained and you go underneath the bedroom window, you notice the footsteps leading up to the trellis and the indentation where the body fell. If you are trained in thieves' tools, you notice the scratches on the chests and doors and locks in several places in Myra's home, as if someone didn't have the key to unlock them. Sometimes while they're investigating, players will ask a very vague question to get a clue. They might say, "I want to make an investigation check on Myra's papers." This player does have an idea on what they're looking for, but you might not be thinking the same way. If you can't figure out why they want to make the check they're making, it is fair to say, "Okay, what are you looking for?" "Oh, I wanted to see if she started to get sloppy in her work." You may not have thought of this beforehand as you're writing the adventure, but now that the player mentions it, you realize Dak isn't a treasurer. Great thought. You don't even need to roll. As you start looking back, starting a few months ago, Myra's handwriting changed. Also, suddenly every entry is rounded up to the nearest 10, and there's still a bunch of mistakes in the map that start after the handwriting changes. Alternatively, sometimes players will be searching for something which is close to a clue, but not quite there. I will still give them any clues in that location, even if they're using the right skill for the wrong reason. I investigate Myra's desk to see if it's trapped. Okay, as you're checking through her desk, you aren't finding anything, but you notice that right in front of one of the bookshelves, there's a series of scratches in a quarter circle, like you often find in front of a door. They weren't looking for the room where Myra's body was hidden, but investigating the room where the doorway had been covered by a bookshelf, they notice the clues that lead them there and give them that clue. After all, this happens all the time in other mystery fiction. Someone will be going through papers and look up and notice something they didn't realize they were looking for. It will happen that you've given players a bunch of clues and they're lost. Sometimes this is because they have too many clues and they're trying to fit them together in ways that don't work, or they've severely misinterpreted a clue and fixated on it. You should let them chew over what they do know for a bit and come up with a few theories. But if they start to get really frustrated, I recommend using a technique that's called send in the ninjas. This comes mostly from spy movies. When James Bond doesn't know where to go next to chase Spectre, they decide to attack him, and a bunch of thugs come at him. When he takes them out, he can search their bodies. He can find a matchbook that is from the hotel where the villain is staying and get him back on track. In the specific example adventure we're building here, Dak doesn't have a lot of options. Maybe, while in the form of Nemeus, he goes to the local thieves guild and pays them to attack the characters because he fears they're getting too close. If the players didn't suspect Nemeus before, they now have him on the suspect list, because one of the thugs will remember that a half-elf hired them. This is also very interesting if they've already found Nemeus's body and they haven't started thinking about what if someone's using shape-changing magic. You can also have Dak take the shape of the Duke and send the official town guards after them. If players are arrested, then the Duke shows up to clear things out. Although player characters hate to go with the authorities, so they might be in a much more complicated situation if they fight the guards who were following the Duke's orders. If the criminal you're using is an organization or a local power, they'll have a lot more options for ninjas to send in. Dak can't use this option very much, but other villains could have a lot of ninjas to spend. Usually, you want to make your send in the ninjas a combat encounter because you're trying to change up the pacing. In some mysteries, this isn't entirely appropriate, but if the players are lost, you want to have something happen. Maybe Nibble's body gets dragged out of the well. maybe someone else finds Nemesis' shallow grave. When your players are the investigators in the mystery, it's hard to tell exactly how the adventure will flow. Generally, what I do is determine how the criminal will act if the players don't interrupt or do anything to change the plans. In this case, Dak will stay in Myra's form as long as he can, because there's still enough in the treasury that if there's any chance to take anything more, Dak wants to. By nightfall, it becomes obvious to the doppelganger that it is time to cut ties. Dak needs food and wants some weapons to leave town. He will use Myra's form as long as he can, but if people start to become suspicious of Myra, he takes on Nemesis' form. He avoids Nibble's form for anything but an emergency, because too many people in town know the gardener, and he doesn't want to say something that will reveal he isn't who he says he is. The Duke closes the city gates while looking for the thief. When Dak finds neither Myra nor Nemesis can pass, he waylays one of the guards, kills him, and takes the form of that guard. He plans to sneak past the walls as soon as he can, which will be at the end of the next guard shift. I need to know how Dak reacts to conflict. Dak is willing to attack someone when he's alone and has the element of surprise, but otherwise he tends to run and shift forms to get out of trouble. If worse comes to worse, he will run away from town broke, as he has countless times before, but he'll only do this if things look really hopeless. He's invested too much time in this. So, I hope this helps when you're going to write your own mystery adventures. The things you need to remember: you want to write the adventure from the inside out, starting with the first crime, which will generally be the last one your players discover. Don't try and focus on where the twists are. Think of multiple crimes, and those will turn into twists naturally as players get deeper and deeper into the story. Give a bunch of clues, because players may not read clues in the way you intended, so they may need extra. And by give, I mean don't make the players work for them. They need them in order to solve the mystery, and if you make it hard to find the clues, they won't get anywhere. If things slow down, send in the ninjas. Know how your villain will act in the absence of the players, now that one of their crimes has been at least partially uncovered, and know what they'll do if they end up cornered. Want to know more about mysteries? Check out Vengeance Bruce, a playthrough Renarin and I did of Telltale's Batman game. We play as the very worst form of the world's greatest detective. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe if you want me to make more of these things. Also, if you end up running this adventure, leave a comment down below to let me know how it turned out. I've never actually ran it, I just made it up for this video. Thanks. Bye.
Ba 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 ba.